I'm Adam in Wales, and this is my board gaming vlog, and today I want to talk about my favourite board game, Evolution, and the games that have come from that system. Now, when I first discovered this hobby several years ago, some of the first games that I really got excited about were Dixit and the game Agricola. And very quickly, these became my two favourite games, and it stayed that way for a long, long time. And in fact, I would still rate these as well, essential games. I absolutely love the pair of them. And I didn't really think that, well, I had no idea what would ever topple them from the top spot. Now, the reason that I loved these games so much, Dixit was purely the artistry of the whole thing, the creativity, but especially the artwork, the beautiful artwork. This was a game I could show to people and they would go, wow, that looks amazing. And I could play it with anybody. I mean, there's all manner of reasons why I love Dixit, but the art is one of the central things there. Now, Agricola is a different thing. Agricola, I love the logical, sort of immersive experience. This is not a storytelling game, and it's not a game that's filled with flavour text, but it is a game where I feel like I'm part of a story. I'm totally immersed in that whole thing. If I want to build fences, I need to get wood. Why do I need fences? Because I want to have some animals on my farm. Why do I need animals? Because I'm going to need to make some food to feed my family. Why do I need a family? Because I need more workers to work on my farm to increase my yield. Okay, so there's a whole logical sequence of steps that Agricola takes you through. And you can start off with that family game in Agricola. I'll come back to that a little bit later, but there's always been this family game in Agricola, and then a more advanced game where you use a whole load of cards and the game comes alive because these cards can combo in all sorts of different ways, so no two games ever quite feel the same, although everything feels very familiar. So that's what I've always loved about Agricola, and that's stayed with me over the years that I've been playing these sort of modern board games. Now, when Evolution turned up, I saw it. I go to Essen Spiel each year. I was aware of this game, Evolution, and actually I kind of ignored it. I overlooked it. Now, Evolution, I don't know why I did, because Evolution is a topic that I'm really interested in. I've read a lot of books about evolution and how it works and the mechanisms of it and the science of it. So as a topic, I find it fascinating. I think I had previously looked into an older, I think it's a Russian game, which was called Evolution, the Origin of Species, which was kind of getting these mixed reactions, and the art wasn't that great. And so I was looking at it thinking, well, this is an interesting theme, but the game doesn't quite catch my my attention. So when I saw the new game Evolution, and I saw that it was based on that previous game, I guess I kind of ignored it on that basis. I also knew of North Star Games, who makes this new Evolution game, as a party game company. They make the game Wits and Wagers and Say Anything. So I was aware of those games. I've got the game Gambit 7, which is like the European version of Wits and Wagers, licensed from North Star Games to Days of Wonder. And I like this game very much. I don't think there's anything wrong with North Star Games party games, but I did wonder whether they were going to be able to make a strategy game that would appeal to me. So I ignored Evolution for some time, and then the opportunity came up to pick it up in a trade. And so I thought, well, you know, I often take a chance if I'm trading. These are the times where I can try out a game that I would otherwise not have tried. And I'm so glad I did, because in that trade I picked up Evolution, the base game, and Evolution Flight. And my eyes were open to the game, really. It was an astonishing game. In Evolution, each player develops a series of species throughout the game. On a player's turn, they're given cards which can be used in several different ways. They can spend the cards to create new species, or to increase the body size or population of an existing species, or they can enhance the traits of one of their species. And this is the crux of the game, because at the end of each round, species need to feed in order to survive, and food is often scarce. Added traits might just allow a species to jump the queue for food at the watering hole, or to find food from another source, or even to turn carnivore and feed on the species of another player. Additionally, traits can be used to develop defences against carnivores: shells, camouflage, climbing, burrowing. And at the end of the game, the player whose species ate the most food wins. It's all the same reasons that I love Agricola. Okay, this game has that total logic to it. It makes sense what you're doing. It makes thematic sense why these things interact in the way that they do. And there's so many card combinations that every single game and every round of every game feels totally different. And you're adapting to the play of the other players. It has the appeal of Dixit in that the card artwork is beautiful. It doesn't look like any other game. This lovely watercolour artwork that looks like illustrations from an old-fashioned textbook. But the colours are so vibrant, so much love and care and attention has been put into it. And what's happened here is that North Star Games and Dominik Krapacets have honed that system from that original Russian game, working, collaborating with those original designers and creating something that just works so beautifully. Now, I have, over time, seen some people turned off by this artwork. Actually, some people just don't like it. They find it garish and odd, and it doesn't fit with what other games look like. And so, it doesn't work for everybody, and that's true of the gameplay as well. This is a game where practically every game that I play, particularly when I'm playing with new players say, well, that's it, solved. We've found the killer combination. We've found the combination of cards that you cannot beat. That dreaded phrase, this game is broken. I hear that quite a lot about Evolution. And it's not true. You try and play that exact same strategy on the second game, it's not going to work. Evolution is like a tennis match, You can do that brilliant shot one game, but if you try and recreate that shot in your next tennis match, it's not going to work because you've got to react to what's sent to you. You can't just repeat what you've done previously. You're going to miss the ball. And that's true of Evolution as well. These killer combinations, intelligent carnivores. First time we discovered intelligent carnivores in Evolution, we were like, well, that's it. This game is done. There's no beating an intelligent carnivore. And then you find that you can. You can beat them in all manner of different ways. You can starve them out. You can attack them. You can team up on them. There's loads of stuff that you can do to stop these sort of runaway leads. That said, it can leave a sour taste in the mouths of some new players. Players who go carnivore on their first turn. They think, well, this is how we play the game, I'll be the carnivore. And then they find there's nothing to eat because everyone else has got defences. They lose their first turn, essentially, because they become extinct. And they're starting from behind. They've got a lot of catching up to do. The game is brutal in that way. And I've seen that happen fairly frequently, players getting shut out of the game. And it's a little frustrating that can happen because it turns people off from the game when if they continued to play it, they would find there's so much to explore. And actually, those times where I've done badly in the game, I've tended to find that I can still enjoy the logic. If my species has been killed off, it's been killed off for very good, logical, thematic reasons, and I can enjoy that. And the game always gives me something. It gives me a pile of cards that I can then use to rebuild. Okay, I'm not going to catch up, but I'm still playing the game right up to the end, and I can enjoy that process. So there are a couple of things that make me say I wouldn't recommend this game to every player, although recent developments within the system have changed my mind to that a little bit. So that's Evolution, the base game. Now, Evolution Flight. Let's have a look at Evolution Flight. In Evolution Flight, players have one additional way to use their cards on their turn. By discarding 2 cards, they can create a flying species. For this, they get a unique species board with reduced body size and a flight trait card. The flight trait protects them from carnivores, but it also gives them access to an alternate food source, which other species can't reach, the cliff top. This food source is stable. It increases each round predictably, and if one player is the sole flying creature, they will have a banquet to feast on every single turn. However, flying creatures expend more energy, hence they must eat additional food, which is wasted and it doesn't count for victory points. To this end, each flying species must eat food equal to their body size before they can feed their population. The flight expansion also adds several new traits and event cards to the base game. So Evolution Flight introduces this whole other level to the game. So in Evolution Flight, you're just waiting for one player to take to the skies. And every round there's going to be food added to that cliff top, whether anyone is a flying creature or not. So eventually that cliff top is going to be full of food if no one's taken to the skies. So at some point someone's going to become a bird. They're going to start to feed on that cliff top. And if we don't stop them as the other players, then they're going to run away with the game. So at this point, someone's either going to have to become an intelligent carnivore, catch that bird and eat it and kill it, or someone else is going to have to become a bird and start to compete with them on the cliff top. So it adds this whole other arms race to the game, which is extremely satisfying. The new traits in this one work really well, and essentially it's a fairly simple addition to the base game. If you're playing with experienced sort of games players, not necessarily people experienced with Evolution, I would say in their first game you could introduce the flight expansion straight away. In fact, I frequently have done, without any major problems. If you're playing with people who aren't very experienced with modern board games, then maybe Evolution isn't a good starting point anyway, although the introduction of a beginner's game, which I'm coming on to, has changed that a little bit. But you could start with the base game and then introduce the flight expansion after 1 or 2 games, I suppose, something like that. So you've got that option. Now, having played Evolution and Evolution Flight for quite a long time, I was quite excited this autumn to see that there were 2 new Evolution games coming along at the same time. So the first one here is Evolution The Beginning. In Evolution The Beginning, there are no species boards, there's no body size being used, and the variety of traits in the game is reduced. The game also becomes turn-based, so on a player's turn, they add food to the watering hole, they gain 1 new species, they draw 3 cards, they play their cards in order to adapt their species, they then feed their species, and then they score. All of this is done before the next player takes their turn. A species is represented by a face-down card on the table. A second card placed in the face-down column represents added population, and so with the 3rd card and the 4th card and so on. Players must feed their species as normal, or this population is going to be lost. Traits are simplified in their effects compared to the base game, but they still revolve around carnivores, defending against carnivores, finding alternate ways of feeding your species, and increasing your population. So Evolution The Beginning in America is a Target exclusive, at least for a short period, but in Europe that's not the case. And Evolution The Beginning is a perfect introduction to this system. And in fact, it doesn't even have to serve as an introduction. This might be all players ever play, and that would be absolutely fine. It's a fun, simple 30-minute card game, back and forth, quite a bit of take that, but still with that sophisticated theme and story and beautiful art of the original game. It's got fewer traits, yeah, but that's the thing that makes it accessible. The rules of the base game Evolution aren't complicated at all. What's complicated is those card combinations and seeing how they interact and predicting the damage that other players can do to you. And that can leave players feeling a little stupid when they haven't spotted what's coming. Now, you don't get that so much in Evolution because you can very quickly learn those traits and know what's likely to happen. So it serves as an excellent introduction to the system, and it may be as far as anyone ever goes. This is a simple game for people who aren't very familiar with board games, or for families, this sort of thing. Albeit it's a fairly aggressive game still, there's a lot of attacking. And it actually is part of a trend. You know, recently we've had this Agricola Family Edition released, which does exactly the same thing for Agricola. Agricola always had a family game in the basic box, but this simplifies it further. And now we have this introductory version, or perhaps this is as far as anyone's going to go with Agricola. I love this trend. I hope this happens more with board games, because a lot of these complicated games, I absolutely love them, but I don't play them that often because they take a while and they take a long time to explain and they intimidate people. These are the games that I'm going to get to play more frequently, most likely. Now, the other game that came alongside Evolution The Beginning was Evolution Climate. Now, Evolution Climate, you can either get it as a standalone game, which includes all the things, so you don't need to have the base game of Evolution at all, or you can buy it as an expansion to the basic game Evolution. As you can see, I've got the standalone game. So let's have a little look at what Evolution Climate adds. Evolution Climate introduces a climate board which represents the changing temperature our species must survive in. When players select cards to manipulate the food supply in the watering hole at the start of each round, they also manipulate the temperature based on the hot and cold symbols on the cards. As it gets warmer, larger species start to lose population, and as it gets colder, the smaller species will die off. The temperature changes also alter the food supply, and changes in temperature can trigger events like wildfires, volcanoes, or even meteorite showers, which can change the environment catastrophically. New traits are introduced to protect species against the heat or the cold, and existing traits from the Evolution base game have added effects related to the climate. In this version of the game, each species can have 4 traits instead of the base game's 3-trait limit, which allows greater diversity. Now, what all of this does is makes the game a little bit more complex. And by no means now is this an introductory game. The rules aren't super simple, the combinations are extensive, and the different ways that you can die are increased. So it's perhaps even more brutal than it was before. But it is in depth. We've got this whole other layer of thematic integration and story in there. No longer can you rely on there being food in that watering hole each turn, because if the other players don't starve you out, then the changing temperature might. So now you've got to make sure you've got these alternative food sources from migrating or from long neck or all these different things that you can do to get food that other people don't have access to. The climate game is not compatible with the flight expansion. That's an important point, actually. There are probably ways that you can mix the two together, but it's not recommended because the balance is lost. Now, Dominic Krapachetz and North Star Games have intended this game as sort of tournament level balance, and I think that's very true of the base game. Certainly, I haven't explored climate enough to know yet, but throwing in, mixing in expansions always is going to affect the balance, and so hopefully eventually there will be people coming up with nice balanced ways to integrate flight into the climate expansion. But as it is, you've got 2 very different ways to expand that base game and have different experiences. I've seen quite a lot of people online who are obviously proponents of intelligent design, religious folk, and they've dismissed the game. Coming from the opposite stance, somebody who is, as I say, firmly entrenched in this idea of evolution and loves that as a something to read about and study, the game actually feels a little odd, because what we're doing is essentially intelligent design. What we're doing here is playing cards to adapt our species. We're playing God here. We're changing the temperature, we're changing the food, we're changing the body size, we're adapting the traits on our own species. None of this is random. None of this is done through any sort of selection that's out of our control. And this is no problem. This is the abstraction that you get in board games. If we go back to Agricola, there's lots of things in there that don't make very much thematic sense. Why, if I go and do one job, can nobody else do it at the same time? But it works for gameplay purposes. So there's a little bit of suspension of disbelief here. And this is true in Evolution Climate and in Evolution. There are promo cards, particularly there's one about Darwinian selection, which I quite like, which means that you play your traits face down. So you don't know what the adaptation of your species is going to be. You can still adapt the body size and the population freely and change the temperature and all the rest of it. But the actual traits that go onto your species, you can add traits, but you don't know what they're going to be. So I guess the game is, I've not tried this card yet, but it's interesting, these little promos that come out. Each new edition of the game and each new version of it always has a bunch of little promos that are released. I don't know how easy they're to get hold of, so some people might not like this because it is essentially exclusive content. However, it's also generally user-generated content, so this is fan-made stuff. People are coming up with this stuff, emailing the company, and they'll produce these beautiful cards that aren't particularly balanced. And some of them are quite funny and silly, but again, it just increases the sort of expandability of this game. There's even a little promo expansion, where you can build a little plant sort of area alongside your species and then use that as a food source and then try and defend it with your carnivores against other people eating your plants. Again, I haven't tried this yet. There's so much to explore here. The game is not for everybody. I can't say that this is the greatest game ever made. I guess that game would be something that, you know, everybody could be involved in. But this added sort of levels to the game, these different versions of the game, do give multiple entry points and mean that, you know, that there is a wide audience for this game in some form or other. It's brutal. It's aggressive. This is not normally my sort of game, this attacking thing, but here it's not tacked on. This is firmly entrenched in the gameplay, and you can always come back, and even the attackers are always vulnerable because everything you do to make yourself stronger usually makes you weaker in some other way. It's a game that you can work to master. It's a game that you can play at a highly competitive level, or you can just enjoy the simple stories that it tells. The artwork is phenomenal. The production standards are great. There's a couple of small errors in the Evolution Climate game, which are just starting to arise on the Board Game Geek website, so I'm sure we'll have answers to exactly how those things are supposed to work. Specifically, the one that's been noted over the last couple of days is that there's some wording discrepancies between the card for migration and the rulebook. But these are minor quibbles with something that is of a very high production standard. These are some of the most beautiful games that I own in my collection. Anyway, I'll stop raving now, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please watch some of my others on my YouTube channel and subscribe. It's Adam's Board Game Wales. And on Twitter, follow me at Board Game Wales, and on Board Game Geek, I'm Adam78. So thank you very much for watching. All the best.